July 4th anymore. I'm not gonna that's 2 bad years in a row. I'm gonna try the 3rd one.
Oh yeah, that's right. It was.
Yes. Last year I wrecked my truck and jumped in fire ants and all that. This year I spent 3 days in the hospital. I'm working for Vida this year. From the January visit and week before last visit, I'm just working for Vida this year.
Well, look, so am I.
I won't be anybody else getting.
What day were you in the hospital? Because I was there Saturday.
Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
I had to go in Saturday.
You were there Saturday. Monday was there.
All the crazies.
Well, I was in a really out.
But I tell you, you hear people talk about Vida and everything. I tell you, you had the best nurses.
I didn't have any complaints with Vida.
It was unreal at the service we got.
Their air.
They've always been that way. That's what we don't like.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I guess you talked about yesterday, y'all talked about price right and present your CMA, so we're going to kind of continue on that theme today, and we're going to be talking about market and service your listing. They go in quite detail in this, but we're going to add some to it and try to put in some more of the e-edge stuff that you might can use and benefit since we all have e-edge. I'm gonna kind of tell you the way I'm doing mine, and then and how easy it is to tailor your program for your listing appointment. And hopefully, when you get on that appointment for the listing, that it will make it run a little bit smoother, and you'll have a little better format to go by. Pretty much everybody in here does listings, right? Tina, have you done listings?
Yeah.
Okay. And Roland has. Well, my biggest thing is when I first started out, I never really started working with buyers that much, where a lot of agents, when they first start out, work more with buyers. A lot of times when a new agent comes on board, it's just a lot easier to work with buyers and start out with buyers because that's going to be quicker revenue. And then as you get settled into your business, you can kind of move and lean more towards listings. Listings is, as we all know, is that, endless source of income. As long as you keep a, steady group of listings, you're going to have that residual income coming in and incorporate buyers in there as well. I think the current statistics is for every listing you have, that creates 3 buyers. Sometimes I wonder about that, but I think a lot of that has to do with the market. But those statistics are done, nationwide. So, I guess if we looked at our listings that we, work with year in, year out, we could probably say that easily it generates 3 buyers. Let's look at the, we're working on the countdown to payday. That's what Ignite is all about. The series of programs is, we started out with leads. You talked about appointments, and now we're talking about agreements, and now we're into the part where you're nailing down your listing and you're going to market your service to your listing client in order to get your listing sold, and that's kind of where we're at today. So we're going to talk about, today we're going to talk about discovering the techniques and advantage of staging a listing. We're going to review the elements of your 14-point marketing plan. How many of us have a 14-point marketing plan?
It's not really 14.
Okay, but you have a marketing plan that you use for every listing? Okay. So we're going to talk about that and how to do that, and I'm going to show you on e-edge where you can go in and create that so that you don't have to, constantly keep, redoing that every time. We're going to learn about the essentials of great service to sellers from the moment they sign the listing agreement all the way through the closing and beyond. We're going to study strategies and tips for great communications and problem solving. And then we're going to discover what it means to provide a super service. I think if you talk to any listed agents that's been in the business for a while, they will tell you it's all about service and communication and follow-up. Perfect example was I got a call yesterday from a townhouse but it was my listing 4 years ago. I have marketed to that couple ever since they bought the property. They were not my clients. I had the listing. Buyer's agent brought them, purchased my listing. I've marketed to them ever since they bought that listing, and they called me yesterday to list their house.
Yeah, nice.
I was excited, but at the same time, when I got there, my first question was, you know, why you call me? And she was quickly to tell me, well, we've not heard from our agent since we bought the house. So that will go to show a simple follow-up, and my follow-up to them has simply been a magnetic calendar every December with my card.
That's it.
And they had it on the refrigerator when I got there. So follow-up doesn't have to be an extensive type of follow-up, especially because really I never figured them as my client. I mean, I did have listing, but it's important to market to those buyers that buy your listing. You know, keep following up with them because you don't know what the other agents do. And in this case, this is a perfect example. You know, they haven't heard from her. They haven't heard from her since they purchased the house. And the main thing they remember about me, and she told me yesterday when I got there, she said, we remember when we did our inspection that the kitchen stove did not have a door on it. And we had to have a stove before we could close on the property. And you did everything to make sure we had that stove. Which, after she said that, I remembered I ended up buying the stove to put in there to make the deal close.
Look, those things come back.
Well, I spent $100.
I didn't.
I spent $100. I remembered it after she mentioned it. I bought a used stove for $100. The guy put it in there. It was in great shape. They were excited because they could close. You know, their agent didn't offer to do that. They were excited. They closed. You know, I sold my listing then, and now I'm listing it, and now I'm getting ready to sell them a new house. So that one calendar, staying in touch, has gained me 2 more deals. And what is that, 99 cents? All 30?
Well, yeah.
I mean, time you mail it and send the calendar and everything. So it's that little bit of follow-up and that little bit of personal touch that is what keeps your business afloat. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more about the super service and how you can follow up with your clients. And, you know, it's not always got to be a detailed follow-up plan. It can be simple little things, but you need to do it consistently. You know, you need to be consistent about it. So we're going to talk about that. The affirmation for today, I guess your pages is numbered the same as mine. Is like 16. If you look at the bottom of page 16.5, it says, I always give more in value than I receive in cash. And I think that's a powerful statement. You know, it's not always about you. It should be about the client and making the deal work. And I think as agents and listing agents, we sometimes tend to forget that. And that's a powerful statement. Look at what the $100 that I spent on the stove, look what my return's going to be.
But that value for them was
Oh,
true. I mean, that was,
$100.
I mean, honestly,
Sure.
think about something like that. Those things.
Well, it was a $73,000 townhouse when they purchased it, and I spent $100 for the stove. You know, now it's bringing me back that listing again for another $70,000. Plus, they're going to be looking into 150 to 175 range.
They're upsizing, so that's
So, you know, that's what you call a great move-up client,
sure.
as well as, you know, follow-up business. So, and that's not the first time that's happened. I've had that happen several times, and that's my main thing, and that's a good conversation starter when you're in a crowd of people. If you're out at the bar, you're out at the club, or you're hanging out with your friends, and real estate comes up, ask them, well, who sold you your house? You'd be surprised at the people that can't even tell you who sold you their house.
Well, I had a, you were tagging this, on Facebook. I'm in this mommy's group on Facebook, and somebody said, was asking about realtors, and they said that they were working with, I can't remember who they said they were working with, but that they were, but I'm not getting any callbacks. And somebody tagged you and said Royal Hunter was awesome to work with. And I mean, there were several others that have been, I think she was asking about Jennifer Jenkins Realty because the realtor that she is working with was not Jennifer Jenkins, but she's just not getting any good feedback. And so, but Jennifer Jenkins had responded. I'm in contact with her, so I don't know what, but I guess she was looking for another one and had heard good things about them. But anyway, I mean, it's amazing how
simple follow-up can bring you a lot of repeat business. And that's my big thing. Like I said, when you're out with groups and you're talking with your friends, throw that out there. Who sold you your house? Who did you? You'd be surprised at the reaction you get. For example, when Dad was in the hospital last week, it was 12:30 at night. We were all there. I was in severe pain anyway, so really I was kind of oblivious to what was even happening. The nurse walked in and she said, "Don't you sell real estate?" And I said, "Yeah." She said,
Be careful, because we're broadcasting.
"Yeah." She said, "Don't you sell real estate?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Well, are you still selling here in Greenville?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, I've seen your picture in magazine ads before." And she said, "When we first moved to town," she said, "we actually saw a house in the magazine that you had listed." But she said, "We ended up working with a friend of ours that we already knew, and we ended up buying in Langston Farms." So we started talking about real estate, and then the next thing, the girl come in to take blood, and she's like, "Oh, you do real estate?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, me and my husband are getting ready to start looking for something." She said, "What should we do?" So we're having a whole real estate conversation there while they're working on my dad, doing blood work and everything. And when they walk out, my dad was like, "My gosh, are you trying to sell something here in the hospital with me sick?"
Absolutely.
I said, "Well, Dad, it's all about networking and contact." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to give her my card when she comes back in here." So anytime you're in surroundings, no matter what the surroundings is, it's all about networking. So, you need to keep that in mind.
And people like to talk about real estate.
Oh, yeah. And, when you think about it, as our conversation went on later in the night with that nurse, she's looking to resell. They're looking for something bigger. So she was having questions, And, of course, everybody wants to know what's the current interest rates and, what kind of deals are out there now. So it sparks out a lot of conversation. And with us doing the Homes for Hero program, that was a good step for me to explain that to her to help get the word out in the hospital as far as the Homes for Hero program. Because we've had a hard time getting the word out in the hospital because Vida is so protective as far as soliciting and third-party people, And I can understand that because I'm sure they get calls from hundreds and hundreds of people every day trying to sell them something or wanting to meet with employees. So it is a little bit harder to get the word out. But the main thing to remember is when you make it happen is your service to the sellers begin at the moment in time they sign that listing agreement. When they sign the dotted line, your fiduciary, that big 50-cent word, your fiduciary to them begins immediately. And that is something as a listing agent that we really have to be aware of. When they sign that dotted line and they're putting all their confidence and everything in you to start to sell and list that house. And then you have to shift gears from more as a salesman to, okay, I'm here to service you, I'm here to make sure that this process goes through. And you're going to run into people that are first-time buyers, or first-time sellers. That's the first time they've sold a house. They're going to have a lot more questions than someone that this may be their third or fourth house. But you should take the same amount of time and the same steps with that person that sold 4 houses as you have that person that sold the first house. Don't assume that that repeat seller knows everything about the process. You go through the listing appointment, you go through the contracts and everything with that repeat seller just like you would that first one. And because things change, the contracts change, conditions change, the market changes, and they're putting their confidence in you to be their source of information through this whole process.
Somebody who's a consumer, they do this maybe, I mean, they've done this maybe once before. So it's, I think that a lot of times you're like, oh, well, you've done this before, you kind of start to get that mindset because you do it every day.
Right.
So you think that it just because they've done it before that they know, and that's just not the case a lot of times. They've done it once,
And I'm
maybe
bad for
twice.
that. I'm bad for that on townhouses and condos. I started out when I started selling real estate. I was working with Helen and Susan, and my main thing that I was doing then was townhouses and condos. I would say I put my knowledge up on townhouses and condos with anybody here in Greenville as far as knowing HOA requirements, insides and outs about any of the rules, regulations on any of our condos and townhouses, because I have sold and listed so many of them. And I've worked with a lot of buyers, so my knowledge of townhouses and condos, I get other agents call me all the time, and ask me questions about different areas of condos and townhouses because I have worked with that so much. And I find myself, because you know so much about it, sometimes when you're sitting in front of them, you'll forget to go over everything. And that's where that 14-step program and your listing program helps keep you on track of the steps to make sure you cover everything. Because it's easy when a seller starts asking you questions about things that's not in line with your program, you kind of get off track and sometimes you don't get back to cover all the things that you need to cover. And that's why it's so important to have a plan and to have a system. And that's the key word, a system, so that when you walk in that listing, you're going to do consistently the same thing to service each client, whether it's a $100,000 house or a $50,000 condo, or if it's a $1.2 million house at Star Hill Farms or Ironwood. That's very important, and that's what separates, to me, that's what separates the good listing agents from the listing agents that try. I mean, it's important to have a system, and it's important to be able to follow through with your client. And you got to be able to reach your clients. Everybody's different. We have, when I left my listing appointment yesterday, the last thing he said is, my schedule is so crazy, email me, text me, or Facebook. That's the quicker way to get up. Don't call me. He said, because he's a policeman. So he said, my shift work and my schedule, he says, me using my phone at work is almost impossible. He said, just email me, text me. So it's important when you start the process with that client is to discuss with them, how do you want me to contact? How is the best way that we can communicate? Had you rather me send an email? Had you rather me call? Had you rather me text? And a lot of that will depend on their work schedule and how, maybe their job and different things like that. So you have some clients that are old school that's going to want you to, they want that phone call. You have some that's, going to text. You have some that's going to email. So it's important to be able to know which process that you're going to communicate. And to me, that's as important as any step in your whole program, is how am I going to communicate to my client? How am I going to communicate to the seller? If you go through the process and you sign the listing agreement, first of all, you go into the listing, and I think some people do a one-step listing, some people do a two-step listing, whatever works for you. I don't like to limit myself as a one-trip listing or two-trip listing. I think it all has to do with the client. Usually when you talk to the client and set the appointment, you kind of get an idea whether it's going to be a one-tripper or two. I mean, does everybody understand how the things you can ask and how you can kind of feel? Does everybody approve? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you have to ask, one of the main questions is, how quick are you ready to do something? Yeah. And a lot of times they will relay to you what they want from you. Like I went on one Friday, and past Friday, and the client called me and he said, we're thinking about selling our house. A friend of ours gave us your name. They told us we should go with you, but we just want to sit down and talk about the process before we move forward. Well, that pretty much tells you 2 trips, you know. So you have to gear yourself to be able to communicate and to do that in 2 trips. So you need to look at your program, you need to figure out, okay, what am I going to cover first, then what am I going to cover in the follow-up. So you kind of just have to have a mindset of how you're going to handle that client. Now, the one I went on yesterday, I knew just talking with him 5 minutes on the phone, you know, he was going to use me. They wanted to use me. You know, this was it. So when I walked in there, I owned it. I said, this is what we're going to do, blah, 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 you know. And I think that has a lot to do with being a good listing agent. When you go in, you have to own the appointment. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to control the room. You have to control the conversation. You have to carry the client through the process. If the client is carrying you through the process and jumping all around, you've kind of lost control. Chances are you're not going to get that listing. I mean, you just know you're not. I never ask if they're talking with anybody else. I know some listing agents always like to know that, and they like to say, well, I'd like to meet with you last. I kind of look at it, if you know what you're doing, you're confident in yourself, it doesn't matter if you're number 1 or if you're number 4. You're gonna leave a lasting impression on that person. I had a listing appointment in Tabernet not long ago. I didn't realize till after I was there a few minutes I was the 8th agent. If I had known that going in, I would have probably just been disgusted and felt like I was wasting my time. But not knowing that going in, I think was a good thing. And then middle way through my presentation, you know, and talking to him, he kind of just stopped me and he's like, well, you know, you're the 8th person we've interviewed. Just go ahead and tell me what you can do that they can.
I think I'm listening to every word.
Yeah, so and then I kind of, you know, I read between the lines. I thought, okay, here's a high-D guy.
Yeah.
He's like me. Cut the nonsense. Let's get down to it. We talked commission quick. We talked no marketing fees because he had been one of his interviews. The guy had told him he charged a $450 marketing fee up front, and that kind of caught him off guard. So we talked about that, and we talked about if the house didn't sell, were you going to buy it? You know, we talked about that. Does everybody know how that program works?
No, explain.
Okay. If you don't know how, if your house don't sell, I'll buy it, that program works, you need to learn how if you're going to be a listing agent. Because nothing will make you look any worse than if that client asks you that and you don't have anything to say or you don't have any type of feedback to that question. In 06, was it, Ms. Helen, that we started that?
Yeah.
06, 07, we actually did that program back in 06 and 07. So it's nothing that's new. It's been around for years.
Greg Rotter does.
Yeah, the program is originally started out is if I don't sell your house in 120 days, I'll buy the house back. Well, sure, that gets everybody excited, but what does that do? When you see that, if you're getting ready to list your house, what are you going to do?
Call.
You're going to call them. You're going to want to know how that program works. Because you're thinking, okay, heck, the worst kind of case I'm looking at is 120 days, or somebody's going to buy my house, and I'm going to be moving on to the next one. So it's just what it is. It is a marketing tactic. It gets the phone to ring. You call that agent that's offering that. You answer the phone. You know, oh, yes, sir, we'd be glad to come out and meet with you. What's the address of your home? We'll work out the CMA, and we'll be out to meet you. So they set the appointment. They come in. They've done a CMA on your house. They tell you what your house will sell for. And then they discuss the program with you. And basically the program on We'll Buy Your House is a marketing program. You sign an agreement for it. And in that program it says we're going to list the house at this price. If it doesn't sell in a week, then we're going to do a certain percentage reduction. If it hasn't sold the next week, there's going to be another reduction. If it hasn't sold the next year. Well, think about that. If you do a CMA and you do a proper CMA on a house, and it says that the CMA, you know, we should list this house for $100,000, And then you, as a seller, agree to a 5% or 10% or 15% decrease in price every week or every 2 weeks because the house hasn't sold. Where does that put you after the first week? It puts you below the market value. Okay, well, how many houses do we know in Pitt County that have not sold if they're 15 to 20% below the market value? Not many. So how many houses am I going to buy in the 3 weeks or 4 weeks if the house hasn't sold? None. None.
No, I thought the rest of it too is what price they're offering for the house. They don't guarantee like top price.
They start out just like any other listing at what the list value should be. And you agree to price reductions, certain percentage price reductions each week if your house is not put under contract.
And then also the commission structure.
The commission structure, okay? How much money would he have to come down, or let me rephrase that. How much money would you as an agent, if you're offering that program, have to come up with for the bank to lend you the money to buy a house? So if your credit's good, how much are you going to have to come up with to buy a house?
1%.
5 to 15%. Just like if anybody else was going to buy a house. Okay, what's the commission he's charging on the house? 6%. Plus $450 marketing fee up front. Okay, where's he got his down payment?
Right there.
Right there in the house. So when you take the price of the house and you take that 6% off and you take the marketing fee off and everything, that house is already 10 to 15% below list value, and then you take another 10% off, where you at? You're 20 to 25% equity in that house. So how much money is he going to have to come up with to get the bank? Exactly. So how many houses has he bought? None. He probably bought one because the program tells you when they teach you that. This is the way they teach you to do the program. They say you go to your local bank, you present the program, you tell them what you want to do, and you say, we want to go ahead and get pre-approved to buy a house. So that if I have to buy a house back, the bank's already aware of what I'm doing and they're already set up. So most people that do that program will buy one house.
Yeah, but they pick and choose which one they want.
Right. So when they go to that listing appointment and you say, well, how many houses have you bought? Oh, I bought one just a few weeks ago. So that's how they
And I'm
work.
using it as investment property.
That's right. So it's like any other tool is a marketing tool. I have a book on it. If you'd like to read the book, Bowen has had a lot of questions about it. I shared the book with him yesterday. He has the book. It's called Guaranteed Sales Program. He has the book. If you'd like to borrow it, just mention it to Bowen when he gets through with it. You know, it's more than fine to share if you want to share it. It's a great program.
It worked really well for us too.
It worked very well for us. In the first year, I would say we've probably done, what, 25 or 30?
Yeah. Yep.
a
But it's
good
also
program.
the market's got to be right too.
That's right. That's right. We were doing the 120 days. Now, I think in his program, he doesn't guarantee a number of days.
Not anymore.
Yeah. And again, that's because of the market. You know, at the
But there's
time.
also one that you say, I haven't sold your house in under 3 days, I'll give you $5,000 or
Right.
$1,000.
Yeah. So when you go to a listing appointment and that comes up, you've got to be able to know how that program works in order to be able to answer those questions back to your client. And why is that? It's because they're dependent on you for all the professional information. If you tell them how that program works and they already know how it works, what are they thinking? Well, Tina's the bomb. She knows, she's not doing that, but she knows how it works. I mean, you know, so you're putting even that much more confidence in them. Plus, you're listing their house, and you're not charging them an upfront fee. So how do you think if you owned a $50,000 townhouse and a listing agent come in and told you you're going to pay a $450 marketing fee right up front, what's going to be your feelings towards that?
I didn't do it.
I had a lady call me the other day from Raleigh. She has a townhouse in Cobblestone, and her first question was, Mr. Allen, I found you on the internet. You were recommended by a friend of mine that lives in Greenville. I want to know right up front, do you charge a marketing fee up front? That was the first thing, the first sentence before I could even say, hardly hello. So I knew right then, even if I was charging a marketing fee, I wouldn't have charged one to her because she was just, she was just irate and against that from the very beginning. So, you knew right then that, you wouldn't dare want to mention it. I said, no, man, we never heard of this thing. Well, I've talked with an agent, and that's what they told me. And they told me I would have to list my townhouse $20,000 less than what I was even thinking about.
What?
Yeah. And I said, well, that seems awful low. I said, how about if I do a CMA? You give me the address and let me do a CMA, and I'll email it to you, and then we can go from there. So you have to be able to relate to the client, but at the same time, you have to know the market. Well, automatically tells me if anybody bought a cobblestone townhouse and you're wanting to price $20,000 below today's market, they're taking a huge, huge loss because they're selling for around $70,000 right now.
And they're not that old.
No, they were built in 06, 06, 07, and 08. So you're not looking at, and there's only been 4 sold out there this year, so it's not like that market is bombarded. And I explained that to her real quick. I said, well, man, there's only been 4 sold out there this year. Well, then why would mine be so cheap? I said, I don't know. I can't answer that question. I said, let me research it a little bit. I said, I know there's been a couple of foreclosures, but it shouldn't be $20,000 below market.
It's $20,000 below, that way then it'll guarantee to be sold.
That's right. That's right.
It's lit.
So anyway,
I think people are catching on to it, though.
Oh, yeah.
there's 3 critical steps they talk about that is phase of your listing relationship with any seller. And let's look at those. They're on page 16.6. Number 1 is stage the property. Number 2 is market the listing. And number 3 is communicate with the seller. Well, let's take them one by one. Stage the property. How many of you, when you go into a listing agreement, do you look at the house before you start talking to the client? Or do you talk to the client and then look at the house? Okay. I never look at the house first. No. Because looking at the house sometimes will cause you to not feel confident in your CMA numbers. Okay, if you do a proper CMA and you do a detailed CMA, and I go out to the house and I walk in and this house is immaculate. I mean, it's spotless clean. You can tell she's just a Susie homemaker. I mean, every picture's perfect, no dust and everything. How much value does that put on the house? But what does it do? It makes you start second thinking yourself, oh my gosh, are my numbers good? Exactly.
What'd you say?
Dee Dee answered it. You make an adjustment. When I go to a listing appointment, I always have a listing range.
Yeah.
When I went into my appointment Friday, I had a listing range of 149.9 to 155. Yeah, 155. When I drove up to the house, I knew right off the bat 149.9 is going to be low, low, low. The yard was manicured. Before I even walked in the front door. I stepped in the front door, the living room looked like it had never even been used. This is in Ashley Meadows. That living room was spotless. I'm thinking, people even live here. Walked on in, she said, come on in the kitchen and sit down. Walked in the kitchen, same way. Don't look like stoves, everything cooked on. Refrigerator didn't have a smudge on it. Nothing on the refrigerator. You can tell, okay, these people are OCD. It's just spotless. Well, at this point, I didn't even know they had kids. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Because I didn't know these people from Adam. I didn't know anything about them. I said, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you got in mind. And, you know, she begins telling me she works at the hospital. He's an insurance adjuster for Nationwide. They have a son that's 8 and have a daughter that's 14. And I'm thinking, kids live here? I mean, okay, there's got to be something wrong, you know. And so anyway, I'm thinking the whole time I'm sitting there looking around, that range is moving up more and more and more, you know. But if I had been set on a specific price when I walked in there, I would have really been second guessing myself, you know, where, you know, what do I need to do? Because obviously I might be low or I might be high, or, you know, because you can walk in one and it be the exact opposite too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could have walked in there and the ceiling been falling down. I mean, I've seen that too. So use that window and keep it within $10,000. If you go above $10,000, I think you're not doing yourself justice, and you're not doing the client justice. Yes.
Is it also a good idea, I mean, this is something if you have the time to do it, I guess you have enough time in advance before your appointment, is maybe go drive by the house? Do you do that, Jesse?
I do. If it's a neighborhood I'm not familiar with, I do a drive-by, and I always pull it up on Google Maps.
Yeah.
Street View. Always pull it up on Google Street View. That's a good little system to use. I'm trying to go all Google now since we use all the Google apps. I'm using more and more of the Google stuff. Google Maps is great, and most of our subdivisions, even the newer ones, you can get the bird's eye view on Google Street Maps.
Oh, okay. So instead of driving by, you just...
That will help you in your CMAs too, because for Ashley Meadows, you've got a lot of houses that's the same floor plans, and some of them might have a garage and some of them don't, even though it's the same floor plan. You know, so that will help when you start doing your CMAs, because you've got the pictures of them on MLS. So if you go ahead and look at the house, you can really do a lot better on your CMA when you start doing that. After I have my sit down with the sellers and we sign the contract and we do everything, then I do my walkthrough. Then I walk through the house, and then as I'm walking through, we have the conversation about inspections. How many of y'all have the conversation on inspections and you tell your client, do you know of anything in this house that needs fixing? I always ask that question. They kind of look at you funny sometimes. It's like they don't want to tell you, but at the same time, then I explain to them why. I say, it will be a lot less expensive to fix the repair now than it will once the inspectors do his inspection. And this is the example I use. A light switch like this from Lowe's you can get for 99 cents. You can change it yourself. If the cover's cracked, it's another 99 cents. You can change it yourself. On the inspection report, and then comes back that such and such light fixtures need replacing or needs repairing, they're going to put by a licensed electrician. Well, you're not going to get a licensed electrician to come out to that house and do work for less than $75 to $100 for just a visit. So that's my little example. I said all of a sudden you turn a 99-cent repair into $100, and it's something that you could be, that you could do yourself. So anything that you know that needs repair, from wood rot to anything, let's go ahead and make that list and get it fixed before the house goes under contract.
Do you suggest I get an inspection?
I've suggested that on some that I visually see a lot of problems, but I haven't listed one like that in a while. It was really, really bad. And I think that's important when you do your walkthrough is you need to have the eye to be able to spot stuff like that. You need to be looking for cracks in the sheetrock and settlement and maintenance and stuff like that, so that you can point those things out. Because now you got to remember, some homeowners are very informative on that kind of stuff, and then you've got some people that are not handyman. They don't have a clue. I mean, they just are clueless. Even if they don't want to have it fixed, like the vapor barrier and windows are always bad. I look for that, because when that comes up on an inspection report, for some reason, a lot of homeowners, they're just like, well, it's been like that since I lived here. Well, yeah, you probably should have had it done when you bought the house, but you didn't. explain what that is to them. You know, explain that's a $50 to $100 repair. You know, if you don't do it now, expect that to be on the inspection report. So if there's things like that you see, point it out. Then at the same time, I'm doing that and doing my walkthrough. I'm doing the staging. I'm giving them staging tips. This room's way too much furniture. This bedroom is totally cluttered. We got the, you know. And a lot of, I get this question a lot, I don't know if y'all do, is, am I better to have the clutter or am I better to pack it up in boxes and stack boxes?
Yeah, get rid of the boxes too.
I think it's better that if you're going to have boxes and you got a garage, put it in the box in the garage. Because when people walk in a room and they see 3 boxes stacked there, they automatically know these people are packing, they're moving. That's why those boxes are there. If the stuff is scattered all over everywhere, they're like, well, these people are just pigs. I mean, you know, this is just a trashy house. I mean, you know, it's just a bad house. So, you know, sometimes you've got sellers that have extra room to pack stuff ahead and all, and go ahead and tell them. I mean, I'm very brutally honest with stuff like that. Because you've already signed the listing agreement. So I got you. So you need to be brutally honest with them. And tell them, you know, this is going to hurt us selling this house because they can't even get in this bedroom. Or you've got so much furniture in this bedroom, there's just a little walkway that you can get around to the side. You know, they can't see anything. Or you've got so many pictures on this wall in the living room of the grandkids, we can't even tell what color it is. And I've seen some that way. I listed one time in Planters Walk, a house. Literally, when you walked in that lady's living room, you could not hardly tell what color the wall was because she must have had 6 grandkids and had 25 pictures of every one of them wall. I mean, it was like all 3 walls were just like ceiling to chair rail, picture from the time they were born till, I guess, when they graduated college. And I was like, you can't even tell what color the wall is. She said, well, they've been there all these years. I hate to take them down. I said, the people that's coming to look at your house, they don't care about your grandkids. They don't care how many you have, and they don't care what they look like every year for the last 25 years. It's true. And it's hard sometimes to get older people to understand that. I think younger people grasp that a little bit more, but a lot of older people, if they've lived in a house 25, 30 years, they're like, are you serious?
People don't see my grandma.
Yeah, I mean, it's like... And I mean, I have family members that are that bad. I have an aunt that's like that. I have an aunt that's just 3 grandkids, and there must be 75 pictures of them in her living room. You literally cannot see the wall for 8 teams. I mean, it's like when you go to see her, it's like you think something's going to fall off the wall. There's so many pictures on the wall. And people don't realize that. So that's where you're home staging. If you get to a house that is just so bad, you may need, before you even mention home staging to the client, you may just need to say, okay, we probably need to run a professional. Because if it's that bad, chances are they're not going to do the things that's necessary to correct the problem. Okay. And the best way to do that is take the pressure off of you as a listing agent and bring that third party in and say, let me be brutally. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many have ever paid for staging? That's a cheap fix. I think Becky
Don't you even say it?
Becky Blizzard.
What about Susan Parker?
Well, you let me finish the story. She was the first one I ever used for home staging. I had a house in Treetops, and when I walked in to list it, I couldn't figure out what room was what. I knew what was the kitchen, and other than the kitchen, I couldn't have told you what any of the other rooms were. It was the most weirdest laid out house in Treetops I'd ever been in. Had 3 front doors. First when I drove up, I didn't know which door to go in. I mean, it was literally, I never understood the whole layout of the house. They said it was the architect that built it originally, that taught at ECU or something, and I was just like...
You just tried it all?
Yeah, it was just weird. And it was like a big open room, and you couldn't tell the difference where the living space was versus the dining room versus the breakfast nook. It was just a really weird... And then there was a bathroom stuck off it that just made it even more weird. And I told the lady when I went to see, I said, well, where's the dining room? Well, she said, I don't really know what the dining room would be. But she said, I have a table over in the corner, and that's where I eat at. And it was a little table, half table up against the wall with 2 chairs. And I said, okay. And I said, well, then you use this area here as your living space. Well, I use it all as my living space. And she had like a piano in there and a couch here, and there was even a bed over there in one corner. And I'm thinking, I said, well, I'm confused myself on the space. You're obviously confused because you can't identify each space for me. I said, so I think we need to bring a professional stager in to stage this. Oh my gosh, she said, I can't afford it, I can't afford it. I said, well, let me make that call and see what we can do. So somebody had told me about Becky, and I called her. She said, for $75, I will go use everything that she has and just rearrange everything. I said, great, I'll send you a check. Mailed her a check for $75. 2 days later, she called me. She said, you need to go see the house and take new pictures. I said, okay. Wow, when I walked in, it was like, I thought, this is the best $75 I ever spent. And the feedback I got from every agent that showed the property that first week was, we can't figure out what's what. I mean, other than knowing what the bedroom was and the kitchen was, you couldn't figure it out. Well, Becky moved the piano around and made it like a divider. She moved the table over to the center, and made like a dining area with 4 chairs. And, I mean, when I walked in there, it was just, okay, wow. One of the ladies at Century 21, I can't remember her name. She's been there forever.
Allison.
Bigger lady. I don't think she's there now. I think she's somebody else. No, it was at the other Century.
Lane Taylor?
Elaine Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
She had showed it to a client before we did the staging. And her client had come back to town and wanted to see it again with her husband. And she called me and she's like, oh my gosh, we're writing an offer on this house. I cannot believe that that's made all the difference. And I'm thinking, $75 and it's made that much difference. She said, my client would love the house and location, but they just couldn't figure out how to do the inside. And she said, now they got it. I'm writing an offer and bringing it. So that $75 got me an offer in less than a week. So, I mean, it's kind of like the stove thing. A little bit goes a long ways. So,
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think that's something you could add to the HUD? To be paid?
Never thought about it that way.
I mean, you got inspectors,
I don't know.
so you can get your money back.
I don't know. Never thought about it that way. It'd be interesting to ask a
Well,
lender to
it'd
see
be like
if it
an
would meet
inspector.
RESPA. I mean, if it met RESPA guidelines as an invoice, I guess I don't see why you couldn't. That would be a
It's
good
just
way
kind
of,
of like a repair.
yes.
You're repairing the decorating of the
Yeah.
interior.
That would be something good to check into.
Well,
because
that's
it-
like you pay $75.
Right.
It'd be nice to put $75 back.
Yeah, if that would be a good question to ask Karen, to find out if it met RESPA guidelines. If it did, I mean,
Yeah.
that might be a great way of,
Marketing fee.
yeah. Well, that's true too, because the marketing fee.
Well, I don't see why it would be any different from like repairs or
Yeah.
like
That would be
Maybe that's a
good
question
to,
for Karen.
yeah, that'd be good to ask her.
She's a good resource. She'll be here tomorrow.
even if you have to take it out of your commission, so
Right.
you've already paid it, at least that's a deduction.
Yeah, that would be good. So at that time you're doing the staging, you have to assess, do I need professional help or is this something I can tell? My biggest pet peeve on one of the main things is refrigerators. I hate walking in a listing and see a refrigerator that's so covered with stuff
I do
you can't even tell. That and the kitchen countertops is my 2 things that I'm like, okay, we gotta fix this. Then the next thing they talk about is market the listing. To me, market the listing. This is where your whole program comes into order as far as making sure you have that 14 point. And they keep referring to 14 points. You got 20 points if you want, 10, 5, or whatever. The thing is to be consistent and to make sure that you're treating each listing the same, and that you have a system in place to where you're doing something that's consistent to each listing. I mean, you realize that your marketing program for a $75,000 townhouse is going to be different than a $500,000 new construction home. It's going to be different as far as probably the amount of money you're spending in the thing, but the actual items that you're doing are pretty much the same. You may do a more detailed virtual tour on a $300,000 to $500,000 house than you would a $70,000 townhouse, but at the same time, you're doing the same process. You're having a virtual tour on both. You're just maybe spending a little bit more money. So it's not so much the value that you're giving each point in your program, is that you have a program and you're following it, and these are the things you're doing. And these are the things that you're telling your seller, these are the things that I'm going to be doing in your house. Because they want to know. I mean, they want to know what service you're offering them in marketing their house. So it's important that you can give them a copy. And then anything you add to it is that much above and beyond. But at least you're giving them a base guide for things that that you're gonna use. I brought with me today the two that I like to use. I started out using this one here. I'm sure you've all seen it. It's Guide to Selling Your Home. This is a presentation that's in eEdge. It's a non-pro. This is the basic non-pro version. You can detail it. You can fix it. It says down here, compliments of Jesse Allen, and then right above that, you can even type in your client's names. So you can personalize it. You can personalize every page if you want to. There's a place on the top of every page where you can put the client's name. I don't usually do that because it takes so much time, but you can do that. I mean, I think the main thing, you can edit this picture. Yeah, you can edit this picture. You can change the stuff around at the bottom. I'm still using the old logo. I've got to upload the new. I'm gonna add the new Points East logo to it because I just think that would look a little bit better. It's got, down at the bottom, it's got my picture, my name, phone number, license number, website, email address, telephone number. It's even got the office address. So I mean, there's quite a detailed information on there. Then if you flip, I think this whole thing is like 20 pages. A couple of them I take out. So you can edit out certain pages if you want to edit out a page. You can edit it out. There's a section in here. It's called It's All About You. And it just goes in, questions for your seller. And there's a page that says Why I Deliver. Tells a little bit about the different things you do as far as communication, marketing, pricing, staging, satisfaction. There is a page in here called the Home Selling Process, Getting Ready to List, which is really good. I always make sure I open the book to this page so that when they go to the book, if they don't see anything else, they're going to be looking at this. It just gives them some information on how to prepare their home, that when everything's in place, we're going to put the lockbox on the property. It goes in, quite a good little detail. It goes in a section about price, location, condition, timing, how buyers find the home. It gives them some statistics on that. Then you get to a page that says, My Home Selling Process, Marketing Your Property, my 14-step marketing plan. Now, I think the one in eEdge is a 15-step, the original, or is it 14?
The original's 14.
Okay. Maybe my old one's 15 and I changed it to 14. 15 sounds to me. All of this is editable. You can edit. So you can go in there, you can edit this one time. When you edit it one time, if you go back and make another one and just change the names on it, that part stays the same. It never goes back. You save it as a marketing material. You call it, I think I call mine generic selling your home booklet. And then you can put in there, it gives you 14 things to do, but you need to tailor that to your own. Because there's things in there, 14 plan that we don't do, like the electronic house thing, and there's 2 or 3 other old school things that they list in there that we don't do. So what I'd suggest is you go in there, you look at the 14 points that's in there, you customize that to your program. And when I say to your program, you customize it to the steps in which you're going to do a listing. And that's going to be your guide from here on out that you follow. If you don't have 14 steps, then you need to create it. Because it's going to keep you on track, it's going to make you consistent. It's going to make your listing a whole lot easier when you go on an appointment because you know the things that you need to cover. And it's going to help keep you on track. And then I always kind of review it real quick just before I leave, just to make sure I haven't forgot to go over something. Because sometimes you get talking to the seller and you can go out that bunny trail and you get off track. But I'm just going to run through it real quick and cover some of the highlights of things that I do, which I talked about staging. I put in there, we're going to place a for sale sign with flyers accessible to drive-by prospects.
Do you still do flyers?
Yes. Yeah. I don't for the townhouses, but I do for my houses. Still do flyers. I usually get more calls from them than to do the actual sign. I know in new construction, the flyers work really well because a lot of times the house is not finished and you can put the floor plan on the back. It kind of gives them more an idea. Plus, it gives them a floor plan that they can take with them so they can kind of see what the house is going to be. It's more like a visual thing. A lot of people like flyers, a lot of people don't. But perfect example, Cooper's Point. I go out there some weekends and I put 15 flyers out. When I go back on Mondays, they're gone. I don't put 40 or 50 at a time. I usually put 15. So you can kind of gauge your traffic, what kind of traffic you're getting as well. And another thing I like to use them for is if you've got a house, say, in Ashley Meadows, and you're putting 15 flyers out there every month or every Friday, and I usually try to fill them up on Thursdays or Fridays, and come Monday, they're gone, and you're not getting any showings, you kind of have to stop and think, okay, what's wrong? Is my price wrong? Is this, it kind of gives you a gauge to maybe need to regroup your list. Just listed cards have worked well for me. I don't do that as much now on little stuff like I used to. I used to do it on everything. I do it more now on bigger houses, depending on the neighborhoods. And I think a lot of this, you kind of have to tailor to what you're listing. I mean, a lot of listing agents list in specific ranges, but my listings range from $40,000 to $500,000. So I'm not a listing agent that has a niche for luxury end, or I'm not just 50,000 to 100,000 anymore. When the market got bad and things started changing, I realized that my townhouse and condo market was kind of going by the wayside, and I was picking up a lot more first-time home buyer listings in that 150 to 200 range. So I kind of had to refocus. And now in my new construction, I pretty much list new construction now from 155,000 all the way to 500,000. We're getting ready to start one in Lindale East. It's going to be right around 500. So, I mean, you kind of have, as a listing agent, you've got to adapt. And I know in some bigger markets, if you watch The Millionaire listing in New York and some of these shows, you'll notice a lot of those listing agents are more specialized in certain price ranges. But I don't think our market, if you're going to be a successful agent in Pitt County, I don't think you can limit yourself to just a specific price range. I mean, I guess you could, but I think it limits your potential income too. And there's a lot of people who don't want to mess with $50,000. But I mean, after you get familiar with listings and you get your routine down pat, it's really not difficult. I mean, it should be any more difficult to list 50,000 as it does at 500,000. It's the same process. It's just getting more money. So,
What's that person who mentioned those other people?
that's right. Well, I always look from the standpoint, if I list 65 townhouses this year and sell 65, those 65 people are eventually going to move up to something bigger because most of them are young couples. Now, it took me almost 3 years before I started seeing that because here in our market, your townhouse market is a lot of college students, you know, or young, very young professionals right out of college. So our market may be a little bit wider there before they do move up, or a few more years before they do move up. But I'm seeing now, I would say on an average, and I haven't figured it up this year, but last year I looked at the numbers pretty close, and it was like a lot of my townhouses were moving up within 3 to 4 years. You know, a lot of those were turning over, and I was relisting. And in last year, I relisted 11 townhomes that I had sold. So I thought that percentage was pretty good, you know, because I'm getting those listings back. And some of them were like the one yesterday. Some of them were ones that I had to list originally and really never had the buyer. But, you know, it's like I said, if you stay in contact with them and you're their go-to person, then, you know, they're gonna be first on your mind when they get ready to list. So their agent has to contact them. They're gonna be contacting you. Just Sold, just listed. I've had really good luck with Just Sold. I have never sent out a Just Sold campaign that I didn't at least get something back on every one. I don't think there's a one I've sent out on Just Sold that I didn't get something back. It doesn't work in every neighborhood, but a good neighborhood, for example, South Hall had a listing in South Hall. Sent out Just Sold, did not send anyone. Sent out Just Sold.
Oh, you should have.
And I didn't get a listing in South Hall, but I got a townhouse listing in Terra because his mother had passed away and they needed to sell her condo in Terra. So even though I didn't actually get the business in South Point, it was from someone living in South Point, so I got the listing in Terra.
I have a question. So if you're the list, I mean, this is just a generic question, so nobody shoot me. If you have the listing, of course, you can send out the Just Sold.
Yes.
But if you didn't have the listing, but you have the buyer,
You can still do it.
it's a good idea to still send out Just Sold
I
around.
think it depends on the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And again, it's not necessarily, you may not generate business inside of that neighborhood, but you may generate business from someone that lives in that neighborhood that has something else to sell or wants to buy something else. So to me, I don't care where it's at. I mean, if I know that I sent out 50 cards and I get a $160,000 listing out of it, that's what you call a great return on investment. I mean, and I've had that happen several times. I've actually always got more listings than you do buyers, but occasionally you get a buyer too.
But you don't like the just listed postcards.
I do with certain neighborhoods. If it's a neighborhood that has not had a lot of activity, and you're going to try to generate getting more people in there, or small neighborhood, I'll do those because you're hoping that maybe somebody's got a friend or knows somebody that wants to move to their neighborhood that will help you. Another one of the points in your plan needs to be the KWLS. KWLS is very, very important to explain to your client how that works and what kind of exposure that's giving their home. And I'm assuming all of you understand KWLS and what it does. It is our syndication site, basically, that syndicates all of our listings to ListHub, which goes to Trulia, Zillow, all the big internet providers and third-party sources. And this is the time when I'm talking about KWLS that I explain what a third-party service is. Because you get people that will see their house on Zillow or they'll see their house on Trulia and something on the listing may not be exactly like it's supposed to be. And they're going to call you and they're upset because they're like, okay, I saw my house on Trulia and it says I only have 3 bathrooms and I have 3.5. What do we do to fix that? Well, to avoid those kind of things, when you discuss KWLS, discuss third-party carriers, and you tell them they're picking that information up from our MLS. Some of them round up the bathrooms, some of them round down the bathrooms, some of them round up square footage, some of them round down. So if you have that conversation with them, you're not likely to get that call in 2 or 3 days when it hits everything and then being upset. And to me, you may still get the call, but they're probably not going to be quite as upset about it. They're just going to be bringing it to your attention. How do you correct something like that? What I tell them is I will check my MLS information to make sure that I put it in originally okay. And if it's okay, then, you know, there's nothing I can do. I've even had some show up sometimes foreclosed properties, and they weren't foreclosed properties.
Well, you remember a couple of times some of our listings came up
Yeah.
at 18,000.
Yeah, and I've had like $180,000 listing show up as 18,000. So a lot of times, though, if that happens early on in the process, it will correct itself. So just watch. And I'm a big Trulia person. I know some people like Zillow, some people like Trulia, you know, whatever you prefer. I've just always been on Trulia longer. So when my listings, after I post a listing, usually in 2 or 3 days, I'll pull it up on Trulia just to look at it. Because Trulia will allow you to add features that our MLS and KWLS won't pick up. So I always pull up the listing, look at it, and if there's some things I can add or comments I add, I type them in Trulia. And I don't go to every one of them and do it, but I just use Trulia because that's one of the main ones that I follow.
Plus, that's tied into how you frame them.
Yeah, so keep that in mind. If you have a Trulia account or a Zillow account and you use one of them more than the other, click on your listing and go in there. It may let you add some information that's not included. If it does, it'll keep it in stored, so you know it's just giving the consumer more information. You can't do that on every site, but 2 of the ones I do a lot is Condo.com and Trulia. Condo.com, because I know a lot of people look there for condos and townhouses. It's very popular and always has been. It's been around about as long as Trulia and Zillow have. And I was a blog person for Condo.com year before last. So I've always got good results from there on condos and townhouses. So if you want to check that out. You know, explain what kind of photography you're going to do, whether you're going to do a virtual tour or pictures. You know, make sure the client understands that. Make sure they understand, you know, what kind of advertisements you're going to do as far as magazines, direct advertising, that kind of. All these things need to be covered in that 14-point marketing plan. You talk about open houses. You know, some clients are all for that, some clients are not. I mean, some just point blank tell you, go ahead and have that conversation and know. Don't wait till after you've listed the house 3 weeks and you call them and say, hey, I'm going to do open house Sunday. Well, we don't want open house. You need to discuss that in your listing when you're doing your listing work and going over all of this. Go ahead and find out what their idea of the open house. I always, at that same time, say, you know, we have a lot of new agents in our office. You know, I may not hold the open house, but someone in my office might hold it for us. You know, they're fine with that usually if you just make them aware of it ahead of time. So just make sure you cover yourself. If they want open houses, then it's good to go ahead and create an open house schedule so that you can kind of put that on your calendar so they'll know. Because, you know, to me, I don't like doing open house with clients. I'd much rather them be gone. You know, so schedule it around their schedule so you can do that. And then some other things is, you know, how you're going to target buyers and then the last thing is I talk about is communicating with the seller, and that's on my 14-point plan, is providing with weekly updates and what I'm doing. To me, it is a bad sign as a listing agent when my client calls me and asks me about feedback or what's going on with the house. That happens. I mean, it happens. And the first thing I do when I'm sitting there on the phone and I hear that, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not doing the job. And you're not. If your client's calling you asking you about feedback and asking you about what's happening with the house or how many showings we're having or haven't heard anything, you're not doing the job.
But how about they call you nonstop?
Well, you're going to have some clients that are going to call you weekly or sometimes even daily. I mean, you kind of have to chalk that up. But if you've not talked to your client in a week or 2 weeks and you get that phone call,
Oh, yeah.
hey, what's going on? Go ahead and tell yourself you're not doing your job if that's happening.
I think it's important to set their expectations on the front end and say, it's funny, Nate and I were just having this conversation in the lobby, but just saying to somebody, you know, what you've already said, what type of communication do you prefer?
Exactly.
And as part of this initial meeting, you know, well, I usually provide weekly updates, you know, and if you time block too, and say, you know, normally I provide weekly updates at, you know, on Monday afternoons. I usually try to call all my clients. So just so you know, you can expect that call from me every Monday afternoon. Now, you have to make those calls on Monday afternoons, because if you don't, if you set that expectation and then you don't need it, then they're going to call you and you're going to be in.
Exactly. And I always ask my clients, how do you want to communicate? We talked about that a little bit earlier. How do you want me to contact you? Do you want to email every Friday, or do you want one every Monday? Or do you want me to call you every Friday, or do you want me to call you every Monday? How do you want me to communicate to you? Do you want me to just call Jim and not call Nancy, or is Nancy going to be my contact person and I'm going to talk to her every time? Because believe me, couples are like that. You know, Friday's listing, you know, the last thing he said when I was leaving, don't call me, call her if you have any questions. You know, what that told me right there, send her everything. I mean, you know, so most of the time if you ask the client how they want to be contacted and everything, then it becomes a consistency. I like to do Mondays.
When you have feedback from weekends.
Right.
And
I always tell my clients that when I explain about CSS and how that works, I always tell them we should have feedback within 24 hours.
Should.
If we get something that I feel like is more important than waiting until that Monday, I will call you as soon as I get that feedback. And then I also, at that same time, that's when I throw out there, if we get the same thing twice, then we may need to address the specific issue. If I get two feedbacks and they say, boy, that red room's got to go, you know, that red dining room is hideous, it's not working, then that's the conversation you need to sit down with the seller and say, okay, here's the feedback we've got. We've got the same feedback twice. You know, what can we do? You know, do we need to offer a paint allowance? Do we need to offer a carpet allowance? Do we need to change out something? Do we need to paint something? You know, this has come to us twice already, and 2 showings back to back right to start with. Obviously, this is an issue. You know, a purple bedroom. I mean, you know, gold bedroom. You know, some buyers just can't look past stuff like that. And we talk about making neutral, sensitive, and that kind of stuff. But, you know, sometimes in a listing, we'll let things slide that we know are going to come up later, because you can tell when you're talking to the seller, it's kind of a sensitive issue. But when the feedback starts coming in, most sellers will take that serious and look at it. And that's why I love CSS. That's why I love the way they do their feedback. If you do not have automatic feedback set up on CSS, you need to get it set up. Mine goes out automatic, and it's 10 questions that I ask. You know, you can set specific questions, and then you can give a comment section at the bottom. I suggest you do that. I like detailed feedback.
Do you use 1, 2, 3, or 4? Here's my problem with that. I can never figure out what the questions are. It just says, ask the questions.
I have to look.
Whatever,
It's
1, 2, 3, or 4. And I don't even know what they ask. So
It's
I don't
been so
check.
long ago, I can't remember, because mine's still set up from the original class I went to and fixed it.
And
I think,
it's not that.
yeah, I think mine is like 6 or 8 questions.
Right, I
And then
understand
the
that.
last one is, I know the last one is your client interested in our home, yes or no?
Well, see, that's, I understand that part, but when you check what kind of questions you want to ask, it's got, I don't know, it's like 1, 2, 3, or 4, meaning,
example.
yeah, but it doesn't show what they're asking.
I have to look at that.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's been so long since
I don't know
I
which
set
one to
that up.
pick, 'cause
yet.
So
And
y'all think the questions, the set questions
I don't
are
know.
better than the, just the
I do.
paragraph?
I
I
do
love that.
because when I was doing it with just an empty paragraph spot, all I would get back is house shows well, buyer not looking, or house shows well, just started looking. Well, to me, that's not feedback.
That's not feedback.
I mean, now I know there's some agents out there. I got one back today, last night. And I laughed when I saw it. It's on a Kittrell townhouse. And I looked it up this morning. I've had 28 showings. 28 showings up until this one. No negative feedback. None whatsoever. I have 28. And I get this one last night, and it says, buyers cannot look past kitchen color. Too bright. Well, it's red. The kitchen's red. And the whole kitchen isn't as big as a 12-12 probably, and they had little as condos on, townhouses on. And I'm thinking, I thought the color looked really good. It had just been painted, it's clean, it's got black appliances against that red, you know, looked really well. It's got light color flooring, it really makes it pop. And I was just kind of blown away. So, you know, you kind of have to weigh the feedback sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, am I going to call my seller in California and say, hey, we need to paint the kitchen? No. 1 out of 28? No.
Well, that showing agent should say, I've got a painter that'll paint this kitchen for you for $100. Let's just look at it, tune that out, and
Well,
everything else.
I'll go ahead and tell you, it wasn't a nice response to the email I sent back. I said, Sherwin-Williams and Lowe's has paint.
I know.
That's
you
all I
will.
said. Because I was just like, and the reason I did that was because she never said that the buyer didn't like it. She said, I don't like. Well, I'm not selling it to her. I'm selling it to the buyer. And when she said, I don't like, I thought, well, you know,
What's that got to do with?
yeah, what's that got to do with the paint colors? I mean, I've been in a lot of houses that I didn't like the color scheme, but the buyers loved it.
Right.
So I don't voice my opinion about that. I mean, some people like blue, some people like red.
Well, as an agent, your only thing you do is just try to overcome the objection, but agents make mistakes unselling.
Right.
And I hate that.
That's
because they wind up shooting themselves in the foot in the long run a lot of times.
Exactly.
But somebody won't buy a house simply because of the negative comments they make.
Well, when I hear a seller make, the buyer make those kind of comments, I say, well, we could probably paint this room for less than $150. I mean, you're looking at a small room. I mean, you know, this is a cosmetic, easy fix.
So see, maybe like the rest of it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, some people are a fan of red and some people aren't, but it actually looks really good in there with the black lights and everything. So the key to me on that is consistent communication with the seller. Because to me, if you get the one call from the seller, you say to yourself, I'm not doing my job. If you get it twice, if you get it twice, you really, really, really need to look at what you're doing and how you're communicating. Another thing is I started using Google Calendar. Love it, love it, love it. It's on my phone. I set all my appointments in there. I have my days marked for feedback. So on Mondays, it shoots me a little reminder thing on Google. It sends me an email, and it pops up on my phone at 9 o'clock. It just says feedback follow-up, and it's just kind of a mental little thing that, okay, I need to touch base. I use a template email, and all I have to do is type in the seller's email address. Most of mine I communicate by email. I just type in their address off of my list in Google, and I add a few words to the other paragraph that's the template, and just tell them, you know, basically how many showings we had this week and what kind of feedback we got, be it good or bad, and just, you know, 2 or 3 sentences, send it to them. You know, you have some sellers that will never respond back to it, and then you have some that's going to answer every email you send them, you know, and that's fine. I had one seller, he point blank told me do not email him. He said, I get hundreds of emails a day with my job. Do not email me. It gets lost in the shuffle. Please text me. And he does not like to be communicated on Mondays. He specifically wants Tuesdays because that's his office day. He works at Biden, That's his office day.
But if you know that on the front end, that's great.
Exactly. That's where Google Calendar comes in, because when you plug it in there, see, I get that reminder on Tuesdays just for him. So if not, I'll forget. I mean, because right now, I think I have 15 listings maybe, which is the least I've had in a long, long time. Year before last, I was averaging anywhere from 30 to 35. It's hard to keep up with 35 sellers.
It's hard to keep up with 4 at the moment.
And the only way I know you can do that effectively is have a plan and a checklist. And I'm a big checklist person. Communication, is very important to me with the seller. It lets them know you're doing your job. If a house has been on the market 120 days or more, if you're communicating with the seller, they're a lot happier than they are if it's been on 120 days and they've heard from you twice.
None.
Yeah. Most of the time, the sellers, if you're communicating with them like that, I do 6-month listings. Most of the times, when it comes time to renew that listing, it's just a matter of sending them the paper or then sending you an email saying to extend it, because you've communicated with them, they know what's going on, they're not alarmed. If you've not communicated with them more than twice in the 120 days, what do you think they're going to tell you?
Forget it.
Haven't heard from him, I need a new listing agent. Nothing to me would be any more embarrassing to have a client tell somebody, well, he lives in my house, I've never heard from him. And I've heard that before from other people. Yeah, they put a sign in the yard. Had a lady from New York call me the other day about a lot in Bath, North Carolina. She said, Mr. Allen, you know where Bath is? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I'm in Gitsy, New York, or something like that. She said, I bought a lot down there from a fly-by-night realtor. I said, a fly-by-night realtor? She said, well, it was some kind of phone sale thing they were having several years ago. I bought a lot for $175,000.
You remember when that was going on, don't you? I do.
She said, I bought a lot for $175,000. I've seen it once, and she said, all I know about it is I got it listed with Rich Real Estate, and I haven't heard from him in 2 years. But she said, I get a bill every 6 months for $300 for mowing. I said, wow, that must be a big lot. She said, no, it's less than an acre. I said, well, first of all, I'd like to work with you. Second of all, we need to find you somebody a little bit cheaper to mow your lot, because I don't know why you would have to mow it more than once or twice a year, where it's at. And she said, well, could you go look at it? And I said, yeah. So she gave me the address, and honest to God, y'all, it took me 3 hours. She had the street right, and that was it. I mean, it was kind of bad. I kind of felt bad after that, because I'm thinking, okay, here's an elderly lady that spent all this money on a waterfront lot. Excuse me, water view lot. There weren't even waterfront. It was on like maybe 15 feet of it extended out to the creek. The rest of it was.
Is it in a bag?
Yeah. And so I went and looked at the lot and called her back. I got my son to go look at it about how much he would charge to mow it, and and it's not much out there. I mean, it's just there was a few big trees and then underbrush. So I called her back and I said, well, my son lives in that area. I said, he said he would mow it for $300 a year. And I said, I can list the property, be glad to sell it, whatever I can do to help you. She said, well, I don't even know if my listing agreement is still active. I said, well, there's a sign on the property, and it is an MLS. I said, but I had a hard time finding it because all the lots there just have 0 on them, and that's the way it is a lot of new construction lots. Take a lot. So she said, well, if I can find the listed agent's name, could you contact him and tell him that you're going to take it over? I said, no, ma'am, I can't do that. I said, you call the listing agent and find out if you even have a listing agreement, and if you do, terminate it, and then call me back, and I'll be glad to work with you. So a week went by, and she called me back. So we're going to list it, but it's, I don't know. But,
How much you list it for?
I think we're probably going to list it for like 70 something.
So she bought it for
107.
Where is it?
Yeah, where is it? In the back, 'cause I was just thinking about that.
It's not, it's something point. I got to look at it.
You take a left as you come over the bridge past the little restaurant?
No, it's way down on the right.
Way down. Okay.
I'm gonna do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they were selling for $170 back then.
Oh, I'm not gonna see.
BB&T is foreclosed on a bunch of them. I mean, if you want a cheap waterfront lot, you can get some down there. But I pulled up, I think Rich had almost 500 waterfront lots listed. And I said to her, where do you fall in 500 lots? I mean, you know,
She
I
said,
mean-
in the toilet.
and again, that goes back to your 14 points in your listing agreement and what you can do for your client. You know, how do you take her in 500 identical listings? How are you going to treat her
Special.
right? So, you know, that was my comment back to her. I said, you're one of 500 lost in the shuffle. And with a company that's got 500 lots, you know, what are they doing for you that's special to get your lots up? And she said, well, they ain't calling me, that's for sure. So, you know. So, I mean, things like that make that huge difference when it comes to communication.
And how'd you say she got you?
She found me on the internet.
Well, let me ask you a question while you're right there. So you're not face to face, you're gonna work with her online or over the phone. What kind of presentation did you make with her?
I sent her a CMA, and I showed her how many lots they had listed. I showed her where her lot was, and that was basically lost in the shuffle. I think they have 20-some lots in that same subdivision listed. I did a CMA, I sent it to her, I sent her the bank stuff where BB&T had foreclosed on. There was quite a few that BB&T had foreclosed in that same thing. I sent her that. Kind of just giving her, I sent her a copy of my 14, you know, the sales book, told her, you know, this is my standard, what I normally do. And in that email, I told her about, you know, I normally do a 6-month listing. In this case, I would do 12 months. Because number one, it's so far away. And I just felt like six months, you know, a lot. And she was fine with that. I mean,
Well, if she hadn't heard from me in 2 years.
exactly. Somebody like that, I don't think you would have to do a whole lot. I mean, I don't even think I'd have to send her anything.
No, I agree with that.
But again, it goes back to your program. If you're consistent with it and you're using it all the time, you would treat her the same way, you know, as what you would that person you're face to face with. And that's where these come in really handy, I think.
Because you need them.
Yeah. Now this is the one I used to use. I have just started using this one, and I like it a whole lot.
Now, which one is that one? I got.
This one might be a pro, and it's the new one. And the good thing I like about this one is it has several different covers for the
I
front.
love that.
It has just a young single couple, you've got a family, you've got an elderly couple moving up, you've got one that's beachy if they're using a beach property. So you've got several choices on the cover. And then, of course, it's covered, you know, got a lot of all color inside. I print everything in color that I can. And it just says, you know, thank you for using me and working with me. Then you can personalize it. You've got a section in here. It's called Real Estate Transaction Refresher. And it talks a little bit about fair housing, which I love that because that covers your fair housing disclosure. And it kind of just tells them what fair housing is. But at the same time, you can customize these blocks here. And you put your name, your phone number, and email. And then down here in this one, it says your property listing will be syndicated in the following online services. So you can list them as well, or tailor that, or detail it, you know. So I really like that. And then it goes on to tell about MLS, what MLS is. And it talks about appraisals. There's a good section about inspections. And I cover this now with them on inspections because it lists the things that an inspector is looking for. And I get that question a lot. Well, what's the inspector looking at? What are they going to be looking for? This actually lists the things: doors, windows, ceilings, walls, floors, roof, radon gas, asbestos, lead paint, electrical systems, plumbing, water heater, insulation, ventilation, HVAC systems, water source and quality, waste disposals, pests, and foundation structure. So it kind of gives them, you know, if you've got somebody that has question, it talks about showing appointments, how that's done, section on staging in here. Then there's a section that I really like called setting your home's listing price. And you can fill all this out ahead of time. So you can put your range in there. You can put the estimated taxes. It's like a little worksheet where they can work out for their net profit when they sell a house, how much it is. That gives them three different scenarios, you know, that you can work with them on that. Which worked out perfect for Friday because my clients have a lot of equity in their house. So they're anxious to see, you know, different scenarios. Like, hey, if we get $30,000 out of it and pay that on the new house, what's our payment going to be on the new house? So we did scenarios on the listing price, and Karen helped me do scenarios on 160,000, 170,000, and 175,000, so they could see what their payments would be, putting, you know, X amount of equity down, 25,000, 30,000, or whatever. So that works out really good for that. And it asks, you know, who do you owe your mortgage to? What is the current value of your home? So I mean,
So we read all that for the contract, so that's good.
Yeah. So it's really good. Then there's a financial section that tells all about, you know, payments and closing costs. A cost worksheet, which is really cool. My people really like that because in their case, like I said, it's important to them to know how much equity they're going to have to be able to put into the new house they're going to buy. So that's a cool little worksheet. And it tells each one of these, it tells what closing cost is, it tells what taxes is, you know, as far as prorating it. So that's an awesome little worksheet that they can work with and do. And then there's one here about what to do for putting your house on the market. It talks about smells and odors and carpet stains, you know, that kind of stuff, which was good for them because they have 2 dogs. So, you know.
Well, it kind of takes some of the onus off of you to say, you know, I mean, if it's already in there, you can say, well, you know, I know you have dogs, just, you know.
It gives you a place with a marketing plan where you have in the old one, you have the 14 points. This has it's broken down a little bit different, so you can kind of separate it. Which is really cool. I'm still working on this. I haven't figured out exactly how I would redo mine yet, but I'm definitely gonna use that. And then it talks about the offers accepted. Now let's get the house sold, and it kind of gives them step by step. On a typical home, this is how things will run. And it talks about, okay, the buyer's going to write the contract, they're going to submit earnest money, and then it gives them step by step of this is what's going to happen. So if you've got a seller that's, you know, maybe the first time selling, that's very, very helpful.
Is that what you consider your lister presentation?
This is what I'm using now because it covers everything.
I like
And
that.
it's easy.
So do you use the free, like what Sandra went over on Monday?
I don't use that unless it's a situation where I know it's going to be a multiple trip type deal. I don't like those, I'll be honest with you. I don't like multiple trips to do a listing. I like 2 at the most. I prefer 1, but I don't like multiple. Because to me, I feel like when you break it up in multiple trips, you kind of lose the people sometimes. You know, if you go ahead, come in hard, cover everything, get it signed, then move forward. And then the last page is a bio page, and you know, you put your name, your phone number, email, all your contact information and everything, which is really cool. And then some note pages for them to write on. So I really, really like this. This is an awesome tool. Yeah. So
Hold them both up together with
if you've not used it, well, it's just, I mean, there's a lot of them.
gosh.
Do you also put in their references, like if you want anything?
This one does not have a place for that, but
Couldn't you add a
on the
page?
bio page, you could.
If you want to know about me more, call these people.
Right. There's a big section here that you can type in, and like I said, I had just started using this. I'm probably going to add more into that when I have time to really sit down and detail a little bit more. But I really like this one so much.
It looks so much more professional.
Now, if you're going to use this and you have Pro,
Yeah.
you can customize it, make one, and you can save it on your desktop. If that way, if you ever go away with Pro, you've still got the plan that you're using. Because they don't change these very often. This is the first change since the original one, since they started eEdge, so that's been 3 years, 3.5 years. So, and they still have the original one. So if you customize this and you say make a generic one, this one is not personalized to the client quite as much as that one is. And I think that's probably why they went to this one, because you don't have to make so many changes.
Right.
This one is personalized more to you with your information, because you plug your name, contact information in it more so than the sellers. But if you go ahead and customize this and get it like you want it, then when you open it up in Adobe to print it, you can just save a copy of it on your desktop or in a file on your computer and go ahead and make you 5, 6, or 7 of them and keep them on hand, and you're good to go. And of course, they have the same one set up in there for the buyers as well. I have one that I use for buyers that I really like. And I've looked at the new one for buyers, and it's like this one. It has a lot more detail. So if you're using the old one for buyers, you might want to look at the new one for buyers as well. So again, I just think that sets consistency. If you're using this and you're going by the format of that, once you do 2 or 3 listings in that format, you're not going to forget the process in which it's like your own checklist. So when you go to a listing appointment, you're going to go boom, 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 and you're not walking out of there and thinking, oh, I forgot to get the key. How many of you do an appointment you leave and forget to get the key?
Always.
I have that road on my checklist on the front at the very top in capital letters, like higher than everything else in bold, key. Because I don't know how many times I've been to a listing appointment, you leave and you think, oh, I gotta get the dang key. But it's little things like that. Again, if you don't have a system and you don't have a check sheet, that you're not going to remember.
Can you share your stuff with us?
It's,
Oh, is it in
I mean,
there?
it's easy.
Checklist.
Oh, my checklist? My checklist is one I use in front of my folder for my contracts, and it's the one we've used forever. I've added to it, but it's the same one I've used. What I'm talking about is whenever I go to a listing, I have my listing folder for the address of the property, and in the front of it, I have a sheet stapled to the front of the folder, and on that sheet, I have a checklist, and I have information for the sellers, and basically it's the name and address, their emails, their phone numbers, their mortgage company, the price I'm listing the house for, the MLS number it's going to be, the lockbox code, the place for the lockbox code and number for the lockbox. Let's see what else is on there. And then there's a section down at the bottom that is for the listing. There's a section who the buyer is, so when you get a buyer, you can have the buyer's information in there as well, and who their lender is, and everything. So to me, I've used that ever since I've been in real estate. We got it from our coach when we were in the credit program. And I've just added to it over the years, and it's my own little check sheet. Now, another thing that I've started this week with the listing I just did yesterday, I'm starting to attach a copy of the sheets Judy sends out. She sent out that spreadsheet the other day, or that sheet, for the listing docs and the selling docs.
Oh, okay.
I made some extra copies of that, and I'm going to start putting that in every one of my folders, so that as I'm uploading stuff in .loop and doing those forms, I can kind of check them off as well. A lot of them I have on mine, but I have a hard time remembering how she wants them put into order in .loop, because that's not the way I'm used to doing it. So I'm kind of just sticking a copy of that in my folder now for every listing, so I can kind of use that as a check sheet as well. So I'd suggest doing that if you need that as a reminder. Then when you go put it in .loop, you've got the folder there, you've got that check sheet with all those things, in it. Another thing I think important communication with the seller is to make them aware you know, when you go over the marketing program, you know, let them know what you're doing. I know you read it to them and you tell them it's going to be syndicated out, and, you know, make sure they understand what that means. A lot of older sellers, I have found out that's not real internet savvy or whatever, they don't quite understand the extent of what internet marketing is doing and where people are looking. And again, there's a section in this that covers that. So just kind of make sure that that they're aware of how that works and what they're looking for. So they'll know that that you covered it with them. Another thing is problem solving. They talk a lot about being a problem solver as a listing agent. I think that's very important. Not necessarily so much problem solving when you get an offer and helping the seller work through that, but a problem solver through the whole process. You know, that seller is looking to you for all kinds of information. They're going to be looking to you for guidance on the inspections. They're going to be looking for you for guidance on repairs. They're going to be looking to you for guidance through that whole closing process. A lot of times, by the time you get to that step, you already have a close enough relationship with the seller to know how much knowledge they have of the whole closing process. So make sure they understand and they know that process, because, you know, it's changed a lot from when I first started real estate. You know, it's changed a lot. I mean, closings don't happen as smooth as they do now. You know, used to, back in the day, you wrote a contract, that was a closed deal. Now I don't consider it a closed deal until at least handing me the check. I mean, because there's something that can happen right on up to the, you know, I had one the other day that was just nuts. The seller called me and he said, Jesse, he said, do you remember that townhouse you sold last year for me? I said, yes, sir. And I'm thinking he's calling me wanting to buy or sell something else. He's like, for some reason, he said, this weekend I didn't have nothing to do, and I was looking online. He said, do you have a deed still in my name? Oh, Lord. I said, no. I said, are you sure you were looking at the right one? He said, yeah. He said, for some reason, I just was on Opus and pulled it up and clicked on it, and he said, the deed still has mine and my wife's name. And this has been almost a year. And I was like, wow. I said, well, no, you know, let me get with the attorney Monday, and this was like Friday evening late. I said, let me get with the attorney Monday, and I'll pull the file, you know, I have, and I said, I'll, you know, get with them and, you know, find out what the problem is. So Saturday I got up and I go in my closet and pulled the file, you know, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, what the heck? You know, the whole time I'm thinking, okay, you've looked at the wrong deed. You've looked at the one that was yours prior. So I go on Opus, and sure enough, it's right there. It's only one deed, and it still got his name on it. So I called the attorney Monday, and I said, we got a problem. You know, I said, that townhouse was closed almost a year ago. I said, the deed is still in the seller's name. Oh, no, that can't be right. Couldn't have closed it. It was like that. I said, well, you know, my sellers, you know, brought it to my attention. I'm bringing it to your attention. You know, we need to look at it. And of course, in a few minutes, she called me back, and she said, you're right. It is. I said, well, how could we have recorded and closed and everything in the deed be wrong? She said, well, what happened is, oh, goodness. She said, when they went to, okay, I didn't know this. When we have a closing and the attorney carries the deed over to the courthouse, they look at the deed, they mark it, book and page to be recorded and put it in a pile. Well, that deed may lay there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month, depending on how backed up they are before it's actually put in the book or put where it's supposed to be, even though it's given a book and page number. Well, when it's given the book and page number, you know, it's officially recorded. It just ain't been put where it's going to stay the rest of its life, I guess. So what happens when the girl comes in then, the register of deeds, when she comes in to put those deeds in the book and the file where they're supposed to be, regardless of the properties. She reviews the deeds to make sure, the stamps are right, the wording is right, no misspellings, does, her thing. And she signs off on it. Well, in this particular case, there was an error in the deed. So she pulls the deed, and they do what they call a request for correction. And, in all the closings, they always say, sign this piece of paper, so if we have to correct anything, we can do it for you. So, meaning the attorney can do it. Well, what happened in this case, they pulled it for correction, and it got put down and was sitting on the desk and had never come back to the attorney to be fixed. The address, something about the address was not typed in right or something. That it was a townhouse with a number and a unit. The 2107B, so-and-so. Well, somehow that was not in the right order. There was a particular order they have to be. Well, it just got lost in the shuffle. And so, the Register of Deeds said, we apologize, it just got put in the wrong pile, and, we'll get it taken care of. So, like 3 days later, the attorney calls me and said, we're sending you over a copy of the new one, and everything's been fixed. So, that seller hadn't noticed it. He knows how long, who knows how long it would have went.
How often do people go check?
Well, who would have gotten the tax bill?
Well, see, that's what I asked, and they said all of that had been changed.
Oh.
See, the Register of Deeds, when they book and page it, they send all those changes. But see, when she proofs it, and she said, the attorney said, this only happens maybe once or twice a year that there's something. Normally they catch it, before that, the attorney catches it. And it just, but I remembered, and I had made a note on that in my folder, we signed everything late on a Friday afternoon, but it never recorded until that Monday morning. So I think that might have had, I don't know if that had anything to do with it or whatever. So, and I don't know any way to check that kind of stuff, but those kind of things happen. I mean, I guess that's what you have title insurance for or what have you. But good customer follow-up. He felt confident enough in me to call me and just say, hey, make sure you look into this and get it straightened out. And that's what you as a listing agent. And I think that goes back to not only your fiduciary right to your client, but I think a lot of listing agents fail to do their job for other agents as well. And when I say that, as a listing agent, it's your responsibility to do covenants and restrictions. It's your responsibility to answer the buyer's agent's questions and help them with their research or anything. Because if you have done your job as a listing agent, you should already have that information to know that type of stuff. Nothing frustrates me anymore than to ask for restrictive covenants from a listing agent and they actually act like you're crazy. Well, you should have pulled that when you did the listing. You should have checked on that when you did the listing. If not, how do you know how to answer any questions like that? Well, I got in the habit of doing that when you start doing a lot of new construction. Because we pulled that early on for new construction because, number one, you got to check to make sure the house you're going to build meets the square footage requirements. You got to make sure that there's not other restrictions or requirements for that subdivision that that you're not going to meet. And I mean, it can even get down to now where there's restrictions in the covenants where you have to plant a certain size tree when you build a house. There's a lot of new subdivisions in Greenville that are like that. It started with Farrington back when we did Farrington years ago. They wrote the covenants, and the covenants said the builder had to plant one tree in the front yard of the house, and it had to be a minimum of 4 inches diameter. I mean, and that was in the restrictive covenants. And that kind of started a trend because you had all these new subdivisions popping up in the middle of tobacco fields, no trees or no landscaping. So they started that where you've got, and some of them even specify what kind of tree. Some of Farrington even specified it had to be an oak tree, some type of oak. It had to be a pin oak, water oak, or some kind of oak tree. So the builders were having to plant trees at the same time they build a house. And now Cooper's Point, we've got listings out there now, new construction, and that's another subdivision that's got that requirement. That for every house, when you put the house, you have to have a tree. It has to be, I think, minimum 4 inches. No.
And if the neighborhood has an HOA, then can't we refer, I had a buyer in this case, I referred the buyer to that HOA, and they have the up-to-date covenants.
Yes.
I assume.
Yes. That's a good point. In listing a lot of townhouses and condos, most all of our condos, well, all of the condos in Greenville have HOAs and a HOA fee, and they all cover different things. And some of them have just changed recently. Terra, for example, if you have a listing in Terra, used to cover internet and some other things, and they just recently changed that to keep them going up on their assessments. They've done away with some things. So theirs have changed. What I like to do is just like Ms. Helen said, because that can be so complicated, I like to refer the buyer to the website.
Yes.
Send them the link. I send them the link usually so it takes them right to the page. So not only can they read the covenants and restrictions, but they're reading the HOA information and what their dues are paid for, who they have to pay for it, how they can set it up on auto draft and everything. And most of the HOA companies are Keystone, HOA Management, and Russell. So it's going to usually be one of those 3 companies unless it's a self-managed HOA, and there's a few of those, but most of those don't cover very much. It's just usually, they usually cover signage or something.
Can I tell you about Southridge? How many have sold in Southridge? They had just, that's where we live.
Okay.
They had just turned their HOA, it was self-associated. They just turned it over to Russell. And it's gone up from $50 a year to $110 a year. Big money. But anyway, it's an HOA, and you can get that information, anything you want to know about that.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing is it went up from 50 to 100.
Right. And a lot of them you're seeing going up now, or even they're cutting out services.
Yeah.
Now, the only townhomes that I know that fall under the HOA fee is Kittrell. Kittrell townhomes, they fall under the same guidelines as condos do because they have a master insurance policy. All the condos here in Greenville have master insurance, and Kittrell is the only townhouses that have a master insurance policy. And a lot of people get confused on that. Because if you have a master insurance policy, you're not required to carry homeowners. So you're basically looking at an $800 premium versus a $200. Because if a buyer puts the HO6 policy on that townhouse, it's going to cost them around $200 a year, versus homeowners would be about $800 a year. So that's a big difference, and there's a lot of agents that don't understand that and realize that. So if you have clients looking out there, make sure you search that.
So basically what you're saying is if the HOA covers roofing and outside maintenance of a townhouse, correct? They don't have to have homeowners.
No.
So like Winnie Ridge is like that.
That's exterior maintenance only. And exterior maintenance only means we're going to cover minor repairs. If a storm comes in and blows their whole roof off, Winnie Ridge is not going to replace the roofs. They're going to assess the individual owners to raise that money. But we're going to do the minor repairs, and just like if 2 or 3 shingles blow off or something, we're going to do those. That was the big issue in Sterling Point when they had the storm. A lot of people say, oh, I'm paying HOA $45. You got to put my roof on. Well, the $45 was covering exterior maintenance, but that doesn't cover if a storm comes in and blows the whole roof off. So they assessed each unit, I think it was between $1,100 and $1,200. And of course, they had a huge uproar over that. But it's like I would try to explain, to people when they call me, I was like, really, do you think $45 is going to replace the whole roof? As well as lawn and maintenance and all the other things it covers. Well, I mean, they didn't understand that, and that was, you know, and that's back to the buyer's agent's responsibility to help explain that to the client too, because a lot of clients think just because they pay $45, $50 a month that it covers everything, and it doesn't. But another thing too, Sandra, to help cover that is most of the time when you call to get your insurance quote, they will tell you that, oh, that's covered by a master insurance policy, so you need this, or no, you've got to have a regular homeowners. But as far as I know, the only townhomes that have master policy is Kittrell, is the ones in Kittrell. And he started that because there had been so many issues. You know, it was just, they felt like with the roof lines and everything, there's just no way you could replace the roof on your unit and me being next door and it not, you know. And that's probably what they should do on most all the townhouses, like start on the point where you've got 8 or 10 in a row, because we had people calling and, you know, saying, well, I can get my roof put on for $400 and you're charging me $11. You know, and I would explain to them, well, you know, you might get it done cheaper, but you're going to have red shingles, and the guy next to you's got black shingles, and the other one's got gray shingles. You know, what's that going to look like from the street? This way, you know, the uniformity the covenants calls, they all have to be black, and they all have to be, you know, the same. So, but there's a lot of confusion on that because people don't understand that. So, if you're, you know, if you have the buyer, make sure, you know, make sure you explain that. And if you have the seller, and you're doing the listing and you don't understand that, then you need to ask the owners, you know, do you pay an HOA fee? Do you pay, you know, what's it covered? What's it for? Who do you pay it to? Because there's a few, like Ms. Holmes was talking about, that's self-managed. Allen Ridge is one that's self-managed.
My neighborhood is self-managed.
There's a few that are self-managed. A lot of them are going away from that now because of the liability, and it's so much to keep up with, so they're doing, you know, management contracts. So,
And collecting the money and keeping the, it clean. We have real strong restrictions in Southbridge. That's why the neighborhood always looks good. Right up the heartbeat.
yeah.
And the president's nice though.
But that's what keeps, you know, and I'm trying to explain to my buyer clients too, that's not just for your protection, that's for everybody's protection. That makes the neighborhood nicer, it just, you know, creates a more uniformity. And if you didn't, you would have cars blocked up, you would have cars without, you know, one of the main things that most of the townhouses have is you can't have any unregistered or unlicensed vehicles parked in the parking lot. Well, you know, if they didn't have that, you would soon have, even with that rule, Keystone used to tow 10, 15 vehicles a week. Oh, yeah, yeah. You'd be surprised.
People just drop them off.
Or either the license expire on them and they just let them sit there. I mean, you know, you can't do that. You can't do that in the city.
Definitely can't in Southbridge. And another thing Southbridge does, you can't park a vehicle on the street for very long. Just parking on the street. Which, honestly, it makes the neighborhood look better.
How far
Doesn't
is it long,
rain.
like 20 minutes or overnight or?
No, I mean, if it was there 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But Dudley's Grant, when you go in Dudley's Grant, and there's a lot of cars that park on the street.
Yeah. It's on
It doesn't look
Yeah.
good, plus.
Well, you know, in the city of Greenwood, you can't park on the grass either.
No, you're not
You know,
supposed
they'll
to.
take it cheap parking on the grass. I think that's great. A lot of people complain about that. But you didn't people park all over everywhere. I mean, yeah. Okay, let's wrap it up. Look at 1620. It talks about aim and high and gives you 4 points there to cover, which I think are really good ones. And the first one is always under promise and over deliver. You know, I think we all should do that in this business. Be solutions oriented. I'm all about that, not just as a listing agent, but even in my personal life. And Susan will tell you this because she and I have worked together so long. If you come to me and ask me a question, you're going to get one of two answers. Either I'm going to give you the answer, or I'm going to tell you I don't know. Because I've always found out in life, as you go through life, you know, if you know you're right and you know the answer, then present it and stick up for it. If you don't, keep your mouth shut. Tell the person you don't know. Research it. Find the answer out and go back to it. I mean, a client will appreciate you a whole lot more for being upfront and honest with them and just point blank say, I just don't have the answer to that, but let me get back with you this afternoon tomorrow. You gain a lot more confidence in that than giving them some half-jacked answer that they're more confused when you get through than you are, you know. And I think that's with anything in life.
And then when they find out the real answer, people like Jack.
Yeah, I think that's with anything in life, whether it's real estate or any part of your business, you know, either you know the answer when somebody asks you or you don't. I mean, and if you don't, then find it out. I mean, that's how you learn. I mean, you know, and most of the times when people ask you stuff like that and you don't know and you research and find out, you'll never forget it again. You know, it's like, it's just drilled in your brain 10 times. Develop staging resources. You know, they talk a lot about staging and hunting staging, and you know, that's probably an area I lack in as far as staying on top of that. But again, I do a lot of new construction stuff, so you know, you don't have to do a whole lot. Yeah, you don't have to do a whole lot of staging with new construction. You know, but you know, have a staging plan and know what that is. And then the last one they talk about is, you know, like we talked about a great deal, customer service focus. You know, be on your game for customer service. You know, follow through, make sure, you know, you're doing a great job of customer service. Communicate. They get some communication tips there. Search for the win-win. Focus on needs, wants, and values. Deliver what is promised and expected. Provide the extraordinary and uncommon, and respond quickly and reliably. I think that last one is very, you know, respond quickly. I think it's 1621. I think the respond quickly is very, very important. I mean, you know, if you've got a listing client that has called you and asked you something, you know, don't be 2 or 3 days getting back to them. You know, stop what you're doing and respond quickly, because that builds confidence in you from them, and you know, that will help build your business. You know, I talked about the clients I had in Tavernet, you know, when I went in as number 8, and I never felt like the whole time. I only met them twice, and then they moved to Michigan. So the rest of our communication was either by telephone or email.
So you got it?
Yeah, I got it and sold it in 4 days. Yeah. And so the rest of our communication was by email and phone call, because they were in Michigan. And I never really felt connected with them, you know, like you do with some clients. But after it was over with and the deal was done, I got the nicest, probably the nicest email I've ever gotten from any client before, you know, thanking me for everything I've done and the follow-up. And I was very good about following up with them, because, you know, like I said, they were in Michigan and they didn't know what was going on. So, you know, I let them know when we were doing inspections, and I let them know, you know, what the report said and when the repairs were done, you know. And all of that was done by email and text. So, I mean, I got the nicest email. So you never know what the clients are thinking. So if you're always giving it 100% and doing your best, you know, it's going to come back to you. You know? Yeah. And we'll end with the quote they have down here, the relationship is worth more than the money. And I'm a firm believer in that, because if you have built that relationship, the money's going to come, because they're going to call you back and they're going to refer you to other people. So, any questions on anything we went over?
Not necessarily a question on this, but I would love to have my Google Calendar on everything.
Okay.
Can we get a class on that?
Well, that's, I mean, I don't think you need a class on that. That's just 2 clicks.
Yeah, but I.
Now, when you say on everything, do you mean the way I have mine, and I think Alan might have it set up this way, is the company stuff pops up on my calendar, and then I add my personal stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And I do it all on my phone. I don't worry about my desktop now. I
Didn't
don't.
see.
But that is sync on that.
I don't know if it does or not.
It
because-
should.
Does it? Okay. I'm not sure about that because I haven't used the one on the desktop. I just
Well,
use the one
I
on the
think you
phone.
can color, I think these are color coded on the desktop.
Well, I don't color code mine. I use the push pins that's on the phone, and it's when I go to here and I want to add an event, and then I hit this little button. It's got like all these little things that pop up,
Oh, yeah.
and I use like the push pin for my appointments, and then there's a couple of little symbols on here. I use the check mark, it's a red check mark and like a red pencil, and so
Let me see. Bring it closer.
I know when I see those, and there's a red star as well.
Where did you get that?
It just when you go to enter an event, you hit this little button over here on the side.
Is yours a Samsung?
Yeah.
Oh.
You hit this little button over on the side, and it pops up all these different things for holidays,
Oh.
briefcase. There's a whole slew of stuff. Oh, you got an Apple. I don't know much about Apple.
Well, let me say something.
But
You said it's only 2 clicks.
yeah, see, I add mine to it. See the push pins. The push pins are pointing.
Let me see your. Oh, yeah.
And you can shade out a color if if I block the whole day. Well, the way you start is you go to eEdge and you go into Office Intranet and pull up the Office calendar, and then you sync it from there.
All right, listen, I'm borrowing this from Milton when I say it.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in the Ice Age, not the computer age. So when you say sync it, I know what syncing means, but where? How do you do that?
From the intranet.
All right, but
I'll show you.
okay.
It's easier to show you than it is to try to explain it.
Yeah, no, that's why I wanted to get you to
Yeah.
help us.
Now that will sync the Office calendar to your phone, and then you can add whatever else you want to it. And that's the way I do, because I don't want so much stuff on there. I mean, it gets confusing. But I use it for all my listing appointments. I use it for everything now. I'm so good.
Sam, I want it.
It sends me an email to remind me. It also sends a 30-minute warning. So, I mean, a lot of times I forgot things, but you get something 30 minutes ahead of time, you'll remember. I mean, that's usually gives you enough time to fix it. But now that I've got used to it, I'm lost without it. I really am.
Well, I think it would be great to have.
Like for today, for example, if I click on today's, I've got my teaching time blocked out, and that's really all I've got on today's.
Well, here, I'll give you a list of mine so you can do some of my stuff the rest of the day.
But
I need some help.
like if I look at tomorrow's calendar, she's got Ignite on there from 9-11. They got an ALC meeting from 2 to 3:30. So I mean those things I can override or
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was really good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes,
Very
thank
informative.
That's good work.
What kind do you have on there?
Joy Ultra.
So first we're going to look at